You stated earlier that you were, in fact, able to artificially inseminate Mrs. Lewis. Is that correct?
Yes. As I stated the first time, the second procedure worked and Annie became pregnant.
And how old would that have made Mrs. Lewis's fetus when it died?
It was 3.5 months after the artificial insemination.
So Mrs. Lewis was 4, not 6 months pregnant as she claimed.
That's correct.
Excuse me, Your Honor. Miss Fishkin, isn't it true that 3 weeks prior to the incident at the Spalding party, Mrs. Lewis was already complaining about problems with her pregnancy?
Yes.
And what were Mrs. Lewis's symptoms?
She was experiencing some spotting.
Excuse me, could you define that?
She was bleeding slightly. And she was afraid, understandably. She came to the hospital late that night. She wanted to make sure that the baby was all right.
So 3 weeks prior to the night in question, there were already problems with Mrs. Lewis's pregnancy.
Yes.
No further questions.
Ms. Richkin, it has been a long and difficult day, therefore I only have a few questions. Did you know that there was a tension between Reva Shane and Annie Lewis?
Oh, yes, very much so.
And would you say that Mrs. Lewis wanted this baby?
Yes, she wanted it.
And in your professional opinion as an OB gynecological nurse, isn't it true that some spotting is not always a sign that something dire is wrong with the baby?
Oh, yes, that's true. That's possible.
Now, on the night that you referred to in your testimony with Mr. Williams, the night that you met Mrs. Lewis at Seethes, at that point in time, was the baby all right?
Yes. I sneaked Annie into the clinic for a sonogram, and we heard a fetal heartbeat. But there was no way to be sure without an obstetrician's diagnosis. I urged Annie to see a doctor as soon as possible to make sure the baby was in no jeopardy.
So the last time that you saw Mrs. Lewis, the baby was still alive?
Yes.
No further questions, sir.